Let's talk about social media. Professor Andy Shabilsky, University of Oxford. Good morning.
Good morning.
Professor. Hi. And Kitty Hamilton, co-founder of Set at 16 campaign, massive ruling. This, I'm going to ask you about that, Kitty. Kitty, what do you think about this ruling? Is this a moment, Kitty Hamilton?
Well, I really hope that it's not just shifting sands, but an actual earthquake in terms of things changing. I think it's finally vindication for parents around the world that actually social media is simply not safe. This is not just parents making it up. It is very clear and present evidence that social media companies like Google, like Meta, and actually let's not forget that TikTok and Snapchat settled out of court, have actually actively been creating products that are dangerous by design. They are addictive, and this is now the proof. The girl, Kaylee, who stepped forward and said, "This has damaged me," was so impressive and is such an important test case, not least because actually her abuse by these big tech companies actually started at 6. And I know that there's a lot of focus at the moment on Meta, but the really interesting story is actually with YouTube because of how it's kind of the entry-level drug for a lot of children. They start at 2 with it on their iPads. They grow up with it now. And so actually having this ruling that says, guys, parents, please listen. This is properly dangerous. You have to do something about this, and you can do something about it now, which is to remove the devices, has to happen today because actually these companies are not going to be changing their tune half as fast as we would like them to, because as we've just heard, they're going to actually be, fighting this further in the law courts. And this is the issue.
Let me do my job. Let me do my
sorry.
job. You say, that's all right. It's very valuable. The abuse started at 6. She should not have been using social media at 6. Would you have let your kids use social media at 6?
Is that a question to me?
Yeah.
Because the answer is absolutely not.
Okay, so her parents should not have been letting her use social media at 6.
I don't think it's fair to blame the parents, because parents right now are being given advice by the Children's Commissioner, for example, that it's okay to allow early years children to have about an hour's screen time a day. Now, unfortunately, as we all know, when your child isn't eating properly, when they're on the potty, when you're trying to get them out of school, just one little short cartoon won't matter that much on your
YouTube.
smartphone,
yeah.
or on YouTube or whatever it happens to be, but it's usually on a smartphone or a sort of handheld device. And it's just a slippery slope. And this is why there has to be really, really clear-cut messaging, probably public health messaging that says, for goodness sake, keep your children off this stuff. Not it's okay a little bit, because unfortunately that is a slippery slope. And what we need is very, very clear guidance that now actually follows the line that we're seeing in the US, which is this stuff is dangerous. If you don't do something about it, your child will end up like Kaylee. And that's not saying that every child will end up like Kaylee.
Yeah,
but
most don't.
Most don't. But what they're still doing is losing hours of every day when they could be playing football, when they could be reading, when they could be actually having a nice time chatting with their parents and siblings. All of these things are lost, and they're lost for good. Childhood is short, and these are really important.
Do you think these social media giants are stealing childhood in a sense?
I do. I absolutely think they are stealing childhood. And I genuinely think that going forward, they will face cases along those lines. They've stolen Kaylee's childhood. They've stolen the childhood of children who have died. And there are more and more of them. This hasn't stopped. Molly Russell should have been the line in the sand here in the UK. She should have been the test case that proved that companies like Pinterest and Meta were producing things that were dangerous by design. But instead, we've limped on telling parents, or they've limped on telling parents, that actually you just need to tweak this and parent control that. Keep lines of communication open dialogue. Don't show surprise when your child is cutting itself. What is this? It's such bad advice. It is literally gaslighting parents. It's been gaslighting parents for too long. And
what if you've
actually
got a little
now,
one who's making a hell of a noise in a restaurant, for example?
well, this is the problem.
Give them a tablet, give them a phone, let them look at something. Give them
Exactly.
some headphones, hopefully, as well. But I
Yes.
don't think Pinterest wasn't part of this suit, by the way. But
No,
yeah,
it
what about
wasn't,
that?
but
Give them a quieten them down a little. Have a look at that.
it's
Have a little bit of Peppa Pig. Go on.
Listen, it's seduced us all. Of course it has. Why wouldn't you?
Seduced.
I mean, this seduced, absolutely. Who wouldn't want 5 minutes of peace at a restaurant
rest
to
of the
chat with your
restaurant.
husband? Of course. But the problem is that it causes such long-term damage. Not only that, but you've got a golden opportunity in a restaurant to sit down as a family, to discuss, to do things together. Actually, loads of restaurants provide, pens and paper so you can draw. And actually, do you know what we do with our child now? And she's older, she's a lot older, but she's not shy of doing this at all. We play cards. And actually, we talk and we have a really nice time. And the smartphones are nowhere to be seen. And I remember those days in a way that I just would never remember scrolling at a table.
So you see
These
the
are moments-
companies scrolling at a table. So the companies need to be doing something about this. This needs to be a real change. Stay there. This is so interesting. Kitty. Strong words, strong phrases, which will resonate with many and horrify others. Andy, Kitty's talking about a slippery slope. Today's Peppa Pig is tomorrow's something very, very damaging. The slippery slope. The other side of this coin is, what are the unintended consequences of a crackdown, Andy?
Yeah, well, I mean, I resonate really strongly with a lot of the frustrations that Kitty's expressing. I have kids too, and it is the slippery slope. The challenge of parenting is not made easier in this technological age. Well, the but is that we've known for almost 20 years here in the UK with the Byron Review back in 2008 that there are really concrete, smart things that we need to be doing in the UK. This isn't about blaming parents who need 5 minutes of peace or, absolutely, let's stick it to big tech. But this is about empowering families, empowering teachers, empowering young people to kind of be prepared for a world where the lines between online life and offline life are blurred, and they're only going to continue to blur. And we really know that giving kind of thinking about this as something to tackle, thinking about this as something to move towards, is really what keeps kids not only safe, but helps them thrive when they do have to interact with the online world. So yeah, I don't think a 6-year-old should be using social media. That sounds kind of crazy. But it really comes down to, what is a young person and what is a family using it for? In our house, Pinterest is the dominant form of social media because our kids have an interest in the arts and the sciences, and that's something that they can really connect and build skills with as part of other family activities.
Andy, is not something they can do if they worked really hard to sort out the algorithmic controversies?
Well, yeah, I mean, that is the question you and we all need to ask ourselves, is that do we really want our kids at any age living inside of, ads? Do we want them living inside of, do we want their data being used to target them and try to monetize their behavior? And really, platforms like Roblox, they're banned in our house. That's not to say that video games
Explain what it
are
is for
banned.
people who don't know.
Yeah, so Roblox is kind of like an online games and experience platform. It's kind of like an app store, but for kind of like games either made by other kids or by adults. But really, it's if you want to kind of connect your kids to play and have them have experiences that kind of straddle the online and the offline world and connect with their kids, you don't need something like Roblox. You can kind of spend the money on a Nintendo Switch and some good games, and you can play together. Not all screens are created equal, and so I guess that's the thing, at least from a scientific or from a research perspective, that these kind of broad prescriptions kind of really miss. We know that this is a nuanced space. We know that parents need good advice, consistent advice, but that advice has to be based on science, because really, at the end of the day, we need to ask ourselves, do we hate big tech companies more than we love our kids? And what does it mean to actually, keep our kids not only safe, but kind of position them so that when they do run into something scary, or they do run into something disturbing, that they can come to us and kind of have a conversation. It's hard to raise kids. This is somewhere between as hard as teaching them to ride a bicycle and navigate puberty, which is like huge. But it's definitely
But we can do this, yeah?
Yeah, well, we have to do it. Like, we owe it to our kids and we owe it to society moving forward. And so, yeah, like we got to make sure that the advice we give is good and we don't kind of give in to fast, easy, and wrong answers. We really
What's
need
a
to
wrong
kind of
answer?
well, I mean, I think anything. I grew up in the States. You can tell from my accent. I think an abstinence-only approach, it doesn't work for sex ed, and it's not going to work for the technological world. We need to make sure that we're actually like teaching kids how to use the online world and not have it use them, because that is what's going to happen. Kitty's absolutely right about that. These companies, they don't care about our kids. But that doesn't mean that kind of locking it all in a cupboard and sticking our head in the sand is going to help. It certainly won't help our family, and it wouldn't help families.
I want to know.
That have even more, fewer
Kitty's
resources. Yeah, sorry.
Answer to this question. Abstinence doesn't work with sex ed, doesn't work with tech. Kitty Hamilton.
But we're not talking about abstinence as such. I think Professor Andrew Prachinsky's point about actually, make it not all screens are created equal is true. Watching television is not the same as watching YouTube on a small phone. We're not talking about actually, we're all living and breathing technology. It will be around children full stop regardless. But the whole point is that you don't have to give children a smartphone and access to social media at the age of 7 to stop them crashing at the age of 17. I think that things like digital literacy are really important, but don't stick a smartphone in a child's hand in order to be able to do that. I think the argument about this being nuanced, I think, is part of the problem, that actually the reality is parents need much, much clearer evidence and information that says this stuff is genuinely dangerous. And the good stuff simply does not outweigh the bad. I've actually written lists before where I talk about the good stuff based on the kinds of things that Professor Andrew say, which is things like communication, connection, community spirit. And then you list all the bad stuff, addiction, exposure to sexploitation, cyberbullying. I mean, the list is about 20 things long, and it's very, very specific. Whereas the good stuff is much more nebulous. And I would argue that actually learning to ride a bicycle is so much more important and three-dimensional skill. You're learning balance, you're learning distance, you're learning how to manage road safety. These are real-life skills that will see children through in a way that swiping and clicking on roadblocks could never achieve. And I think it's...
You can learn how to ride a bicycle and use tablets. It's not what's
you can.
Zero-sum game.
But the problem is here, Nicky, that actually once kids have tablets in their hands, they don't want to ride bicycles anymore. And that's the biggest tragedy of all. And don't take that from me. That comes from a press statement issued by Vodafone, who are in collaboration with the NSPCC, who said now probably about 4 or 5 years ago that parents, that children are looking forward to their tablet more than riding a bike.
Yeah, but the NSPCC are against a ban for under 16s, which
they
is
are against the ban.
This is some news just in. You'll like this. You won't like it, but you'll like hearing it. You'll be interested in hearing it. The FT is reporting that OpenAI has shelved plans to release an erotic chatbot indefinitely.
I mean, but here's the but Nicky, like that's great to hear, but that doesn't help parents, and Kitty's absolutely right. You got to, as a family and as a society, we need to be looking at these positives and these negatives.
Why is it great to hear? Why is it great
because
to hear?
Because it's
common
with an
erotic chatbot. If you want an erotic, look, I'm the devil's advocate here. What is? And it's not that I'm not particularly into erotic chatbots. I don't think I need one in my life.
Well, they're not. They're not doing it, right?
Well, they're not doing it. But what's wrong with doing it for adults?
Well, I don't think that you can do something necessarily for adults. You can and roll out a new feature without having to think, really carefully about what it might mean for the rest of our society, and what it might mean for young and for vulnerable users who can make it past all of this age estimation and verification technology. Like,
Well,
this is part of the problem.
They've got it in pornography, haven't they? That came in. We did phone-ins on it. That you know.
Yeah, and you can see, but you can look at Australia, and you can look at anywhere where there's a porn ban with some technological solution. And we know here in the UK and in the US and from Australian reports that none of this age verification or age estimation technology works. At best, it's racist and wrong. And at worst, it violates kind of the fundamental privacy.
Why is it racist?
Because people who the technology isn't trained on, so people from minority backgrounds, people who are Black or Asian, it's not as good at predicting whether or not users from those backgrounds are of a certain age. And it's been shown now in repeated government analyses that these technology can't be improved.
Get better tech. I mean, the tech from yesterday to the tech tomorrow is, it's massive exponential improvement in all that. Tell me this, Andy.
I love that idea. As a parent, I wish that was true. But the fact of the matter is, these governments, we do evidence reviews every 5 years. And if we're willing to give up absolutely all of our privacy and have all of our faces scanned all the time, that'll work. But short of that, it's a pretty horrifying idea that large American companies are releasing sex chatbots.
Only if you want to use an erotic chatbot. Should we not defend? We don't like erotic chatbots, but should we not defend to our death the right for others to use erotic chatbots, as somebody like Voltaire said?
I may not die on that hill, but I think that your listeners need to think very carefully about whether or not they want to have erotic chats and have all of their kind of thoughts of that nature be stored in the U.S. in a searchable database. That seems like quite a silly thing to do.
I think, bearing in mind the commercial potential of a toy like that, I think this is a preemptive strike because they know how dangerous these things are. And they're doing it precisely because they know, having seen the direction of travel, that longer term, these things are going to actually cost them a fortune in lawsuits. And as we've seen with some of these chatbots, they are already in small children's hands. And they are genuinely dangerous. We simply do not know what this technology is doing to us, and certainly not doing to the youngest of us. And I think actually taking a step back and saying, okay, this is a step too far, is something to be welcomed. Now, test it. Make sure it is safe. Make sure that you know that it is targeting the audiences you want, and then knock yourself out. But actually, until that point, these things should not be getting on the market. So I'm very glad they've been preemptive.
Let me ask you this, Andy. What will the bosses of Meta and Google be saying to each other today about this judgment?
I think they're probably high-fiving each other. This is a tiny amount of money given their annual turnover, and this type of scrutiny, it really only helps the big players who can afford law firms.
More.
Yeah, but I mean, it's more and more and more. It's millions on a basis of billions and hundreds of billions. I mean, these are folks who lit $80 billion on fire for the metaverse. This isn't even a parking ticket, and so you have to ask yourself what kinds of cool, possibly family-focused, community-oriented social media platforms don't have lawyers. What's going to happen to Wikipedia when it gets classified and has been as a form of social media, a piece of information that's all the more important in this age of LLM slop? And you really need to ask yourself, do you want to be able to even set up your own website anymore and share news without, being regulated to the same extent as these big dogs? And so for them, it just means that they're going to have less competition in the future, and they may pay a few more speeding tickets.
People.
I disagree. I disagree. I think it sends out a very clear message. I don't care if they're high-fiving each other. I hope that parents are listening really long and hard and recognizing now that these things are genuinely dangerous, and actually the only way to deal with it is to be a little bit black and white and to say, I'm sorry, sweetheart, but you are not getting a smartphone for a very long time because these things are too dangerous, and no matter how hard I try, I cannot keep you safe. I cannot watch you 24/7 on Roblox. I cannot do that. I can't completely sort of make sure that everything you watch, everything you see on YouTube is actually safe. And therefore, I'm going to make a parental decision to say no. And actually, right now is when we should do that. And I would urge parents, especially the ones who haven't given a smartphone yet, please stick to bricks instead. Let your child go out on a bicycle. Let your child play. Spend time talking to them. Now, I know
They
we've
can
all
Google
got used
bicycle to
them.
see which one they want, first of all.
All right,
Listen,
but as long as that's really managed.
thank you very much indeed. That was spectacular. Jerry in Lowestoft, Stevie in Glasgow, Roz, good morning, in Worcester. Is the tide turning, Roz?
I hope so. I completely agree with the lady that's just spoken. I'm one of those parents that said no.